thinking about her for a while, but her thought processes, her thinking is so topical and fits in with our world. You know, these kinds of insights from people like her. She was a very intelligent person, and they're timeless. They never get old, you know. No matter what happens in the future, she's going to always inform us about our time, because she's a deep thinker. You know, she's not shallow at all. And she confronts herself. She interrogates her own beliefs as she's going along. She's not so prescriptive or anything. She's just talking about what she thinks and believes, and it's pretty interesting. So, so Miloš, he wrote a piece about her at the end of this, but I just wanted to, so the French Revolution looms large. Rene Descartes is somebody she likes. Kant, a lot of her thinking is Kantian, very big influence. So some of the things, a good tree can never bear bad fruit, nor a rotten tree beautiful fruit. That's biblical. And she kind of thinks that a lot of things about life during her period, and you know, the Nazis are in charge in Germany and so on. She has to think about the Spanish Civil War that she attended. She has to think about helping de Gaulle in England, and then hopefully fighting in the resistance in France. She had some idea about flying 100,000 nurses into France, and they would do everything they could to help out and die glorious deaths. She was very heroic. For me, she's one of my favorite working class heroes. She's brilliant. So this particular piece is called The Abolition of All Political Parties. And that sounds radical, but she thinks all political parties are full of it. You know, you can only be a liar if you're a politician. And political parties only exist to perpetuate themselves and not to serve any social function whatsoever, hardly, you know. Obviously, lobbyists and corporations, corporatists and politicians serve capital, big money, and capital code writes the laws. So the rules-based order is only for a few people. I mean, if you think about it and look at it honestly, you'll notice that. So Rousseau is somebody she also refers to. So she says, Rousseau himself knew this well. Collective passion is an infinitely more powerful compulsion to crime and mendacity than any individual passion. In this case, evil impulses, far from canceling one another out, multiply their force 1,000-fold. She's very interested in one's ability to think and have some sense of where they fit into a community as an individual. So when the country is in the grip of a collective passion, it becomes unanimous in crime. If it becomes prey to 2 or 4 or 5 or 10 collective passions, it is divided among several criminal gangs. Divergent passions do not neutralize one another, as would be the case with a cluster of individual passions. There are too few of them, and each is too strong for any neutralization to take place. Competition exasperates them. They clash with infernal noise, and amid such din, the fragile voices of justice and truth are drowned. So there's this idea that, all these parties are just gangs, out for themselves. when you're a person, an individual in a small group of people, a collective or a commune or a farm or on the commons or whatever, you can be heard and you can speak out. You can tell people what you think and feel, and you can be heard, and you can have agency. You can make decisions. So when you're in this, you're just basically saying, I identify as a Republican or a Democrat, and that's who I am, and blah, blah, blah. Then the party tells you what to think and do. If you want something, they never listen to you. They're going to do what they have to do to perpetuate their existence, nothing for you. The second condition is that the people should express their will regarding the problems of public life, and not merely choose among various individuals, or worse, among various irresponsible organizations, for the general will does not have the slightest connection with such choices. So, in the States, for example, you can see that majorities of people want, people to be able to decide if they need an abortion. And you have a whole bunch of lies and propaganda about people aborting babies at 9 months, which is all nonsense. It doesn't happen. But, you have lies just to perpetuate one club that thinks they have a constituency that's also brainwashed. And they're basically just working for the prestige and the corporations, and not for people anyway, not even their own constituency. So for a while, all too briefly, these representatives truly were simple channels for the expression of public opinion, but they're not anymore, not at this scale. Merely to state the two conditions required for the expression of the general will shows that we have never known anything that resembles, however faintly, a democracy. We pretend that our present system is democratic, yet the people never have the chance nor the means to express their views on any problem of public life. Any issue that does not pertain to particular interests is abandoned to collective passions, which are systemically and officially inflamed. So this is truer now than it ever has been. You have the media and the propaganda machines, and they're getting us all worked up about this, that, and the other thing. So there are these collective passions that we hardly think about and don't interrogate. And it has nothing to do with democracy. They're just playing us. And I often say, you really think things are democratic on that scale in the United States or Europe, for example? There's a kind of faint outline of democracy, but people really aren't heard, and they really have no ability to express themselves. The very way in which words such as democracy and republic are being used obliges us to examine with extreme attention two problems. One, how to give the men who formed the French nation the opportunity to express from time to time their judgment on the main problems of public life. Two, how, when questions are being put to the people, can one prevent their being infected by collective passions? So it's hard to find solutions to this. It appears obviously that any solution will necessarily involve, at the very first step, the abolition of all political parties. So political parties to her are just part of the great game, I call it. This I have my team, you have your team. Nothing ever really happens other than that capital is protected, which is why they're there in the first place, to protect power, and pretend like they're doing something for us. And no matter how much we protest or speak out or attend meetings or write to our Congress people or whatever we do in our countries to think we're participating, they don't hear us, and you can see this in the wars that are occurring now. People aren't being heard. It's protect the game, protect the oil and gas, your geopolitical position for a powerful few of a class of people who own everything, and we're wage slaves, which is fine. I mean, we have lots of toys, and some of us make enough wages to have a pretty damn good life. But anyway, there are three of these. A political party is a machine to generate collective passions. So how can that be untrue? I mean, you look at the collective passions. It's interesting that in Republican states, the murder rates are higher, the crime rates are higher than in blue states in the United States, because there are different collective passions, and they're inflamed by the party machines. On both sides. A political party is an organization designed to exert collective pressure upon the minds of all its individual members. The first objective is also the ultimate goal of any political party, is its own growth without limit. So we have this growth mentality. Everything's going to grow, and the money's going to go to the top, but everything's has to keep growing. And the parties just want to grow until they control everything, but they never can. I mean, you see this today. It's so clear if you look at it honestly and don't get caught up in collective passions. Because of these three characteristics, every party is totalitarian. At the end of the day, everywhere, without exception, all the things that we generally consider ends are in fact by nature, by essence, and in a most obvious way, mere means. One could cite countless examples of this from every area of life: money, power, the state, national pride, economic production, universities, etc., etc. And how has this changed from the early 30s to now? I mean, it just completely tracks, because we live in the same social system. We have more tools to run it. We have censorship. We have manufacturing of consent. We have all of this manipulation through the media. We hardly even notice. We have better tools to do all that. They data mine us all the time. We're pressured all the time. You can't say this about this, you can't say that about that, or you get doxxed, you get canceled. So her big thing is goodness. And I won't go too much into that because it's really deep in her thinking. But goodness alone is an end. So this is an idea that there are common goods to all people, in any time, anywhere, under any system. I suppose health is a good, education is a good, things like that, and feelings as well, and being able to think freely is a good, and all these kind of things. So collective thinking, however, cannot rise above the factual realm. It is an animal form of thinking. Its dim perception of goodness merely enables it to mistake this or that means for an absolute good. So that's something to look for in her work that I find extremely profound. So a political party's doctrine cannot have any meaning. So you think about doctrines and dogmas and so on, and you have to decide which one you're going to study and adhere to. And once you choose it, that's it. You're done. You're done thinking. You're done interrogating. You're done, because you've decided that the Greek Orthodox Church is you, and whatever the arguments for that. It could be anything that you adhere to. So you're a Republican, period, and that's that. And, you vote for the guy because he's a Republican. But these doctrines are nothing, because they're not doing anything. They don't exist, really. These politicians are ignorant people. They're players. They play a certain game, and they can do it well. But they're not smart folks, wise folks out for any good. An individual, even if he spends his entire life writing and pondering problems of ideas, only rarely elaborates a doctrine. A group of people can never do so. A doctrine cannot be a collective project. She was a mathematics person, and she's a mystic Christian, as I said. She understands, So she says, Christian doctrine, Hindu doctrine, Pythagorean doctrine, etc., etc. But then what is meant by this word is neither individual nor collective. It refers to something that is infinitely higher than these two realms. It is purely and simply the truth. So the truth is important to her. And we always talk about that, how can we agree on what truth is in some context or situation. The goal of a political party is something vague and unreal. If it were real, it would demand a great effort of attention, for the mind does not easily encompass the concept of the public interest. Conversely, the existence of the party is something concrete and obvious. It is perceived without any effort. Therefore, unavoidably, the party becomes, in fact, its own end. You don't have to think. You decide you're a this or a that. You've gone through the arguments, adopted the dogma, and that's it. You're done thinking for yourself. Your agency is over to a large degree. First, an axiom is set. For the party to serve effectively, the concept of the public interest that justifies its existence, there is not one necessary and sufficient condition. It should secure a vast amount of power. Therefore, the essential tendency of all political parties is towards totalitarianism, first on the national scale and then on the global scale. So if America is an empire, it's a global empire. And if Trump becomes the next president, how totalitarian is his clique going to be at the end of the day? Are the institutions in the United States still strong enough to keep him at, behaving in some pseudo-democratic sense? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen, who's going to be elected, but that's just an example. Every reality necessarily implies a limit, but what is utterly devoid of existence cannot possibly encounter any form of limitation. There is a natural affinity between totalitarianism and mendacity. So dishonesty, lies, right? When these people become involved with a political party, they merely wish it to grow, but to grow as a thing that knows no limit. In no circumstances could they ever believe that their party might have too many members, too many votes, too much money. And, this is the way it is. There's never enough. You have to grow all the time, and you're competing against other like-minded believers who have to grow. And it's a zero-sum thing in a way, but it's the only game in town. The petit bourgeois temperament prefers the cozy picture of a slow, uninterrupted, and endless progress. And the progress is a better iPhone, but everything else is pretty much the same thing. So whatever the progress is in our fossil capitalism ends in 3C above, an extremely hot world, a completely different environment, a lot of people dead, a lot of violence before that happens. It's just the way it is. One cannot serve both God and mammon. So, whatever the concept of God is, I think she thinks of it in a Spinoza kind of way. God is kind of truth. God is a good, on a deep moral level, in a mystical, transcendental sense, and so on. And mammon is just the system, the game, Once the growth of the party becomes a criterion of goodness, it follows inevitably that the party will exert a collective pressure upon people's minds. The pressure is very real. It is openly displayed. It is professed and proclaimed. It should horrify us, but we are already too much accustomed to it. How can you not say that applies to us now? We see this all the time, and we're so used to it, we hardly even notice, Political parties are organizations that are publicly and officially designed for the purpose of killing in all souls the sense of truth and of justice. And you can think about it in any system around the world, right? Propaganda is not to impart light, but to persuade. Hitler saw very clearly that the aim of propaganda must always be to enslave minds. All political parties make propaganda, right? Political parties do not profess, it is true, to educate those who come to them, supporters, young people, new members. But this is a lie. It is not an education. It is a conditioning, a preparation for a far more rigorous ideological control imposed by the party upon its members. So you think your absolute truth, your party or whatever, and there's half the population that disagrees with you? Can they all be wrong? On this scale, in this system, we can't communicate with any creativity, agency, imagination, or purpose. We're condemned to be, slaves to these ideological imprints. So whenever I shall have to examine any political or social issue, I swear I will absolutely forget that I am the member of a certain political group. My sole concern will be to ascertain what should be done in order to best serve the public interest and justice. And then she has to go and live that way. Hence, she stops teaching and becomes a factory worker, so she knows what it means to be a factory worker. Marx and Engels never did that. And she puts her body in line. If partisans in France are eating this amount of food every day, that's what she's going to eat. It's radical, it's intense, it's extreme, but that's her integrity expressing itself in her action through her beliefs. His comrades and even many other people would accuse him of betrayal. Why then did he join a political party? So there's a lot of stuff here. And she also points out that, people just say, as a conservative, I believe, and then you just parrot the party line. As a socialist, that's why everybody seems like they're reading a script on TV, because they are. They memorize their PowerPoint deck, and they just repeat it to fit in, to keep their job, their career. They're not actually thinking. They're not saying anything. They don't have any agency. They're just serving the machine, the political machine, or whatever corporate function they have to serve in order to have a lifestyle that they think they need. As a Frenchman, I think that, or as a Catholic, I think that, And then you're stuck in that. Once you decide that, that's what that is. So you identify that way, and you kind of curtail. So even if you identify as an Irish Catholic or whatever it is you identify with, a Japanese Buddhist or a Shinto or whatever, you should still be able to interrogate your beliefs and place them within a broader context and understand what the common goods, without being too ecumenical or Unitarian or whatever the hell you want to talk about. How different it is, unique it is, and also what the commonalities are between the pursuits of truth and justice. If you're interested in that. If not, never mind. Just join the Hitler and do what he tells you. Some little girls who declare they were committed to Gaullism, as the French equivalent of Hitlerism, added, "Truth is relative, even in geometry. Indeed, this is the heart of the matter. So we have the same thing with post neo blah blah modernism, where suddenly truth is relative, and it's like whatever, Gaullism, Hitlerism, what's the difference? Moral equivalency, and yet you have one crime here followed by another crime that's much bigger and more horrific, and somehow it's okay because the party line says it's okay, because the rules-based order insists that it's okay, and you can't go against that. And it's a nightmare. If there were no truth, it would be right to think in such a way. But she believes there is some deep moral truth in our human conscious minds, and that it can express itself through culture and through life. If, however, one acknowledges that there is one truth, one cannot think anything but the truth. But one thinks not because one happens to be French or Catholic or socialist, but simply because the irresistible light of evidence forces one to think this and not that. So instead of saying climate change is a hoax, you look at the evidence honestly with an open mind and heart, and you say, there it is. It's real. It's there. Thousands of people are being bombed to death, innocent people, and there's no rationalization that justifies it. And then you have to decide. If there is no evidence, if there is doubt, then it is evident that, given the available knowledge, the matter is uncertain. So then you think probabilistically and Bayesian, and you kind of say, well, based on what we know, what I know, I can lean towards this or that. I'm sorry. Mouth is dry. She talks a lot about inner light, which is a big thing. A man who has not taken the decision to remain effectively faithful to the inner light establishes mendacity at the very center of his soul. So if you're not looking honestly through the inner light, I think of inquiry and self-examination and the interrogation of reality to find evidence and truth, then you're just in the realm of lies, dishonesty. For this, his punishment is inner darkness. And you think about suicide rates and drug addiction and all this kind of stuff, and you think about the preconditions and the systemic nature of things, and you start to get to the causes, complex causes of these things, and you wonder, what do I do to make it better, to eliminate some of these causes, and to put in place an environment where these kinds of pathologies don't happen. Of these three sorts of lies, lying to the party, lying to the public, lying to oneself, the first is by far the least evil. Lie to the party. Yet, if belonging to a party compels one to lie all the time, in every instance, then the very existence of political parties is absolutely and unconditionally an evil. And I can't see anybody telling the truth in politics anymore, based on what I know and what I observe and the evidence that I see, that I can understand, my dinky little mind. I just think they're all full of shit. They're liars. And it's evil. It is evil because they're doing it out of greed and insecurity and arrogance and narcissism. They're just so pathological. They're sick people. And we worship them. We actually think they work for us, and they don't. But one day people will know this because they'll have to take care of themselves, and they'll need to cooperate with one another to survive. It's coming. I'm sorry. You're not going to be living on Mars. You're not going to be shopping at this, mall for the rest of your life, consuming wildly and burning tons of gas and coal. This thing is winding down. And the best thing you could do for your children is help them understand this and then decide for themselves how they're going to live in a very different set of circumstances. So how do these wretches manage to know the various points of view they are supposed to present? Who can have instructed them? Which oracle? Is it going to be the AI oracle of whatever corporation? Is it going to be social media? A collectivity has no tongue and no pen. All the organs of expression are individual. All the organs of expression are individual. And this isn't Thatcherite. This is a deep individualism that is connected to people and places. That's why she writes about roots and so on. The socialist collectivity is not embodied in any person, and neither is the liberal one. Stalin embodies the communist collectivity, but he never lives far away, and it is not possible to reach him by telephone before the meeting, but he lives far away. So she's saying all these ideologues and politicians, they're not available to you. You can't talk to them. You can't reason with them. You can't tell them your ideas, thoughts, and feelings. They don't give a shit. They're perpetuating their power machine, which is for Stalin, the Communist Party. And the Communist Party of China today is different from this one. And the kind of revolutionary fervor with Lenin that Mom talks about is different. You have to put it in its context and understand what he means when he invokes that. It's not a shallow thing to say. And so if you don't understand it, or you think that mentioning someone like Lenin is just a sin, well, you're wrong. You're ignorant. You could learn about it. I'm not saying he's a great guy or I want anybody like that running anything. But in her way of looking at it, it's very illuminating. So if having put oneself in such a state, one were to abandon oneself to automatic reactions, one would quite naturally speak a language in full conformity with the communists, socialists, or liberal point of view. To achieve this result, there is but one condition. One must absolutely resist the contemplation of truth and justice. If such contemplation were to take place, one would run a horrible risk. One might express a personal point of view. So you can't have truth and justice if you're going to fall in line with these cliques and their ideologies. And if that's, so many people online are just there to express some form of an ideology, however shallow or deep. They can be scholars and fall into the same trap, but they'll never have a personal point of view. That's why I say when you read a book, take your time and read it carefully and then meditate on it for a while. Think about it. Let it wash over you. What you liked, didn't like, agreed with, didn't understand. Take your time. And then maybe some actual personal idea, thought, or feeling will bubble forth and emanate from you, and it'll be an exciting feeling, trust me. Truth is all the thoughts that surge in the mind of a thinking creature whose unique, total, exclusive desire is for the truth. So yeah, you can't handle the truth. There's no truth. It's all relative, whatever. But I think if you think about it, you know truth when you see it, right? For instance, they desire truth, but they also desire conformity with such or such received ideas. We all do that. We have to conform to get by. Yet how can we desire truth if we have no prior knowledge of it? This is the mystery of all mysteries. It's kind of like the hard problem of culture. And the mystery, what is the truth? Words that express a perfection which no mind can conceive of. God, truth, justice, silently evoked with desire, but without any preconception, have the power to lift up the soul and flood it with light. So some of these things, as I keep saying all the time, are ineffable, mysterious, hard to understand, difficult, hard problems. But when you think deeply about these things, something comes up that you feel is right and makes sense. And it hardly ever fits into just one ideological scheme. It is when we desire truth with an empty soul and without attempting to guess its content that we receive the light. Therein resides the entire mechanism of attention. And she talks a lot about attention. This is important because we don't look at that enough. Like, what are you paying attention to? And in relationships, they require your attention. And that's a deep thing because it's a commitment on the level in the realm of reality that's impossible to live without. So, and I love this idea with an empty soul, like that saying, you have to empty your cup before you can learn anything from me. It's a Japanese, Chinese aphorism. Your cup is full, right? You have to make space for new ideas, thoughts, and feelings. It is impossible to examine the frightfully complex problems of public life while attending to, on the one hand, truth, justice, and the public interest, and on the other, maintaining the attitude that is expected of members of a political movement. The human attention span is limited, is it not? So, one or the other, it's really hard. You're going to be pressured. At the end of the day, all that matters is the power. And yet no suffering befalls whoever relinquishes justice and truth, whereas the party system has painful penalties to chastise insubordination. People get punished, they get doxxed, they get hurt if they don't play along. These penalties extend into all areas of life: career, affections, friendship, reputation, the external aspect of honor, sometimes even family life. The Communist Party developed this system to perfection. Now think about it. All of this is still happening now, only worse because we have better tools to wreck people if they step out of line. And when capitalism was developing in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, right up to the Industrial Revolution, it was draconian, man. If you cut down a tree, you could be hung for it. People were being kicked out of their villages as they were being taken over by large owners. Things were shifting quickly, and it was brutal. It was brutal. If you didn't accept a job that was offered you, you would be branded and punished. There's a book about the commons I'll tell you about sometime, but it's very, very interesting. So anyway, true attention is a state so difficult for any human creature, so violent that any emotional disturbance can derail it. So, and by the violence here, it's a different meaning than what we usually think about. It's intense and it's difficult, just like meditation, right? Any disturbance can just derail it. Therefore, one must always endeavor strenuously to protect one's inner faculty of judgment against the turmoil of personal hopes and fears. It's tough. You're worried about a lot of things, and it's really difficult to do this. If the complexity of the calculations demands his total attention, inevitably he will make many mistakes, even if he happens to be very intelligent, very brave, and deeply attached to the truth. Mistakes are made. You know that, right? When a country has political parties, sooner or later it becomes impossible to intervene effectively in public affairs without joining a party and playing the game. So, are you going to work on the inside or the outside? Sooner or later you got to join a team, right? Political parties offer a marvelous mechanism which, on the national scale, ensures that not a single mind can attend to the effort of perceiving in public affairs what is good, what is just, and what is true. So you're saying this whole thing is an impediment to us, to our understanding. But of course, on this scale, the way we live, this social arrangement of ours, you need it, right? Anyway, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because things are going to change, and you can be ready to imagine how the changes will happen, what you're going to do, so on and so forth. Maybe you'll have more freedom and agency in your thinking. So if one were to entrust the organization of public life to the devil, he could not invent a more clever device. That's why she refers to this stuff as mammon, right? So, yeah, how can anyone subscribe to statements, the existence of which he is not even aware, by simply and unconditionally submitting to the authority which issued them? You're watching Fox News or Morning with Joe or whatever, or somebody just tells you this is what you think. Read Thomas Aquinas, the church sanctioned it. That's it, you're done. That's down here. This is why St. Thomas Aquinas wished to have his affirmations supported only by the authority of the church, to the exclusion of any other argumentation. Nothing more is needed for those who accept this authority, he said, and no other argument will persuade those who reject it. Thus, the inner light of evidence, this capacity of perception given from above to the human soul, in answer to its desire for truth, is discarded or reduced to discharging menial chores, instead of guiding the spiritual destiny of human creatures. The force that impels thought is no longer the open, unconditional desire for truth, but merely a desire to conform with pre-established teachings. The stifling of the spirit by the inquisitorial regime provoked a revolt, and this very revolt took an orientation that, in turn, fostered further stifling of the spirit. So whether you have an inquisition, whether you have a revolution, Jacobins, whatever, it's all going to wind up that way eventually, unless you can live in a different form and on a different scale and in integrity with yourself. The Reformation and Renaissance humanism, twin products of this revolt, after 3 centuries of maturation, inspired in large part the spirit of 1789, the French Revolution. After some delay, resulted in our democracy, based on the interplay of political parties, each of which is a small secular church that wields its own menace of excommunication. The influence of these parties has contaminated the entire mentality or age. So even now, right, you have these writers writing about the blue church, this kind of thing, mainstream stuff. None of this is new, right? All the thinkers of today, none of it's new because the situation hasn't changed and we're still the same creatures. So, the problems remain. If you're reading Society of the Spectacle or something like that, taking a different look at it, without so much emphasis on the personal, your own agency, your own soul, your own self. In fact, he submits to his thinking to the authority of the party. I agree with the party on this and that question. I have not studied its other positions, and thus I entirely reserve my opinion, pending further information. If somebody said that, he would probably advise to come back later. It's like, I don't know. I haven't looked at all the things. I'm not sure yet. I agree with some of this stuff over here and in my party, but the other things, you wouldn't get very far if you don't go along with the machine. As a monarchist, as a socialist, I think that it is so comfortable. It amounts to having no thoughts at all. Nothing is more comfortable than not having to think. And I think people are like that. We're just generally intellectually lazy, and we don't want the responsibility of thinking for ourselves. Collective passion is the only source of energy at the disposal of parties, with which to make propaganda and to exert pressure upon the soul of every member. One recognizes that the partisan spirit makes people blind, makes them deaf to justice, pushes even decent men cruelly to persecute innocent targets. One recognizes it, and yet nobody suggests getting rid of it, of organizations that generate such evil. So look at what's happening today. This is happening, and it's tragic. Real people are getting obliterated, blown up, destroyed, emotional scars, psychological scars forever and ever. It's just a horror story that never ends. And, at elections, candidates would tell voters, I wear such and such a label, which tells the public nearly nothing as regards to their actual position on actual issues, but rather, my views are such and such on such and such important problems. Elected politicians would associate and disassociate following the natural and changing flow of affinities. I may very well agree with Mr. A on the question of colonialism, yet disagree with him on the issue of agrarian ownership, and my relationships with B may be the exact reverse. So we don't do that. We don't often disagree with a colleague anymore and work things through. It's about the team. Are you a Tory? Are you Labour? Outside Parliament, intellectual circles would naturally form around journals of political ideas. These circles would remain fluid. This is where she goes into how she thinks we should organize things. But I won't go too much into that. You should read it. There is no clear boundary between inside and outside. Whenever a law is impartial and fair, it is based upon a clear view of public interest, easily grasped by everyone. It should be plain and simple. It always succeeds in weakening what it forbids. Most often, great things are easy and simple. And I agree with that. Institutions that regulate the public life of a country always influence the general mentality, such as the prestige of power. People have progressively developed the habit of thinking in all domains only in terms of being in favor of or against any opinion. And afterwards, they seek arguments to support one of these two opinions. This is an exact transposition of the party spirit. So think about it. It's the same today, right? You cherry pick, you're for this, against that, then you look for evidence to support what you're in favor of and to put down what you're against. And it's not really critical thinking. It's, there's so much fallacious logic in it that it's tragic. In the realm of opinion, there are broad-minded people willing to acknowledge the value of opinions with which they disagree. They have completely lost the concept of true or false. So wouldn't you like to know what your enemy is thinking, instead of just dismiss them as evil and stupid? We don't engage with Vladimir Putin. We just... The war is profitable. Others, having taken a position in favor of a certain opinion, refuse to examine any dissenting view. This is a transposition of the totalitarian spirit. The intellectual world is permanently full of trends and factions in various stages of crystallization. To achieve celebrity, it is useful to be surrounded by a gang of admirers, all possessed by the partisan spirit. Yeah, Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris, it doesn't really matter. You have your gang and audience capture, all this stuff. It's all the same. She sees right through it clearly, and the language she uses to express this is so accessible to us today. Simple, straightforward language. In the same fashion, there was no great difference between being devoted to a party or being devoted to a church, or being devoted to anti-religion, being an atheist. Doesn't really matter. Even in school, one can think of no better way to stimulate the minds of children than to invite them to take sides for or against. They are presented with a sentence from a great author and asked, "Do you agree? Yes or no? Develop your arguments." So they have to decide they agree or not before they develop their arguments. You can't even think about it. Meditate on this text and then express the ideas that come to your mind. Now, this would be a better way to do it, right? Read it, think about it a lot, and then tell me what you think, rather than do you agree. Nearly everywhere, often even when dealing with purely technical problems, instead of thinking, one merely takes sides, for or against. Such a choice replaces the activity of the mind. This is intellectual leprosy. It originated in the political world and then spread through the land, contaminating all forms of thinking. So that's beautiful. What a wonderful thing. This leprosy is killing us. It is doubtful whether it can be cured without first starting with the abolition of all political parties. I love it. So I'm sorry that 52 minutes, but I don't know if you're going to read it or not, but I just love it, and I think it's something good to read and think about. There's an article here about the importance of Simone Weil, and there's another article about her connection with Albert Camus. It's all really good stuff. I've underlined so much of it, but I'll stop right now and let you read that. So I hope you appreciate that. I hope you'll look into her if you haven't already, and if you have, maybe it's time to go back and revisit Simone Weil. What a beautiful woman. One of my working class heroes. Thank you for listening. Take good care. William T. Out.